They never remembered my birthday, never invited me to a single strategy meeting, even though my reports consistently topped the charts. 11 years. Not one promotion. Not one thank you. Until the day I quietly walked away. And the next morning, their entire system collapsed. The company bled $5 million a day, and no one could figure out why. My name is Rachel Monroe, and for 11 years, I was the ghost in Delta Forge Technologies' machine. At 38, I held the title of Lead Automation Engineer at our Cleveland headquarters, though you'd never know it from how I was treated. My desk sat in the corner of the third floor, surrounded by servers humming their endless mechanical song. While executives paraded visitors past the glass-walled conference rooms above, I lived in the basement of their consciousness, essential but invisible. I'd solved every major system failure since 2013. When the production line AI went haywire during the Samsung contract, costing us $800,000 an hour, I worked 47 straight hours to rebuild the neural network from scratch. When our supply chain automation threatened to collapse during the port strikes, I created a workaround that saved the company $12 million. My solutions became the backbone of operations worth hundreds of millions. Yet somehow, I didn't exist. Strategy meetings happened without me. My name got dropped from email chains, not maliciously, just forgotten. "Oh, we didn't think you'd be interested in the business side," they'd say when I asked, as if the systems I built weren't the business. The engineering council met monthly to discuss technical direction. Despite being the most senior engineer, I'd never received an invitation. "It's more for client-facing roles," my manager explained, though half the members had never spoken to a client. At company all-hands, they'd celebrate victories I'd engineered while I watched from my desk, debugging the very systems they were praising. The CEO once walked past me in the hallway and asked if I was new. I'd reported directly to his team for 3 years. But it was the silence that hurt most. In a workplace that thrived on visibility, where people scheduled sync-ups to be seen syncing up, where they sent late-night emails to prove dedication, my actual work disappeared into the void. I became the woman who fixed things that nobody understood were broken, who prevented disasters that never made it to anyone's radar. They called it a meritocracy. They preached innovation and recognition. But merit only counted if it came with a PowerPoint and a confident voice in meetings I wasn't invited to. So I adapted. I learned to document everything, not for recognition, but for protection. Every line of code, every system dependency, every critical process that ran through my hands, I recorded it all. Not in the company wiki where others could claim it, but in my personal archives. I told myself it didn't matter. The work was what counted, the elegant solutions, the stable systems, the quiet satisfaction of keeping the lights on while others took the stage. But everyone has a breaking point. And mine was coming. The promotion cycles at Delta Forge were like watching a rigged lottery where everyone pretended not to notice the fix. Every year, I'd update my resume, document my achievements, and submit my self-evaluation with the quiet hope that this time would be different. 2014, they promoted Marcus, who'd been there 6 months and whose main contribution was organizing happy hours. "He shows leadership potential," they said. 2016, Sarah got the nod after presenting my supply chain optimization as her strategic initiative. I'd spent 3 months building it, she'd spent 3 hours making slides. 2018, the new director of engineering position went to someone external who asked me, in his first week, to explain what a PLC was. But 2019 cut deepest. That's when Jacob Mills joined the team. Fresh from Stanford, Jacob had that specific combination of confidence and incompetence that management mistook for brilliance. I spent 6 months teaching him our systems, walking him through the architecture I'd built, explaining the intricate dependencies that kept our automation running. He took notes in a moleskin notebook and nodded thoughtfully, as if he understood. "You're brilliant, Rachel," he'd say. "I don't know why they keep you hidden down here." I should have seen it coming when he started scheduling meetings with my manager without me, when he began presenting process improvements that were simply my existing workflows with new names, when he started golfing with the VP of operations every Thursday. The announcement came in January 2020. Jacob Mills, promoted to department director after revolutionizing our technical operations. They held a cake celebration in the main conference room. Through the glass, I watched him give a speech about innovation and leadership while I handled a critical system failure that would have cost us $2 million if I hadn't caught it. "You're too valuable where you are," my manager told me later, not meeting my eyes. "We need someone technical to actually run things while leadership focuses on strategy." Translation: we need someone to do the work while others get the credit. The pattern was always the same. The promoted ones spoke fluently in corporate buzzwords, turned 10-minute updates into hour-long presentations, and somehow always happened to share the CEO's interest in cycling or bourbon or whatever hobby was trending in the executive suite. They were visible in all the right ways, sending company-wide emails about their wins, dropping by executive offices for quick chats, ensuring their faces appeared in every company newsletter. Meanwhile, I kept the machines running. When our biggest client threatened to pull their contract over system instability, I rebuilt the entire infrastructure in a weekend. When a ransomware attack nearly crippled our production, I'd already implemented safeguards that saved us. Each crisis I prevented was another invisible victory, another thankless save. I started keeping a different kind of documentation, not just technical specs, but evidence. Every email where someone else claimed my work, every meeting where my solutions were presented without attribution, every time Jacob or Sarah or Marcus stood in front of leadership, explaining systems they couldn't build or fix if their lives depended on it. The folder grew thick. Accomplishments, uncredited, lived encrypted on my personal drive. A monument to 11 years of being essential but invisible. By late 2023, I'd stopped hoping. I attended the mandatory career development workshops where they preached about making your impact visible and building your personal brand, knowing it was all theater. The real currency wasn't competence, it was being the right kind of person. The kind who looked good in meetings, who laughed at the right jokes, who fit the unspoken image of leadership material. I wasn't bitter, not exactly. I was something worse, clear-eyed. I saw how the game worked, understood I'd never be allowed to play, and made a choice. If they wouldn't see me, I'd make sure they felt my absence. I began to plan. Not revenge in the traditional sense, no dramatic confrontation or public humiliation. Just a simple question. What happens when the invisible foundation vanishes? They were about to find out. June 15, 2024. The day that crystallized 11 years of invisibility into pure, cold determination. Delta Forge had just secured the Meridian contract, 9 figures, our biggest deal ever. The entire company buzzed with excitement as preparations began for the all-hands celebration. Emails flew back and forth about the heroes who'd made it happen, the visionaries who'd transformed our capabilities to win this game-changing partnership. I knew the truth. The Meridian team had spent months evaluating our automation infrastructure, my infrastructure. Every technical deep dive, every proof of concept, every demonstration that convinced them we could handle their volume. That was my work, running on systems I'd built, maintained, and evolved for over a decade. The all-hands invitation arrived at 3 p.m. Celebrating our Meridian victory, honoring the team behind our success. I wasn't on the agenda. At 3:47 p.m., as I sat debugging a critical synchronization issue that threatened tomorrow's production run, my phone buzzed with the livestream notification. Against my better judgment, I opened it. There was Jacob, standing at the podium in his tailored suit, gesturing at a simplified diagram of my system architecture. "When I revolutionized our automation framework," he began, and my hands stilled on the keyboard. He walked through each component as if he'd birthed it himself. The distributed processing model I'd pioneered, the predictive maintenance algorithms I'd coded during countless midnight hours, the fail-safe protocols that had saved us from catastrophe more times than anyone knew. "This is why Meridian chose us," he continued, "because we have visionaries who understand that automation isn't just about machines, it's about strategic thinking." Strategic thinking. He couldn't debug a Hello World script if his life depended on it. The CEO stepped up next, placing a hand on Jacob's shoulder. This is what leadership looks like at Delta Forge: taking ownership, driving innovation, and delivering results that transform our business. The applause echoed through my phone speaker while I sat alone in the server room, fixing the very system they were celebrating. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even their celebration depended on my invisible labor. I closed the stream and returned to my debugging. The synchronization issue was complex, the kind of problem that would cascade into millions in losses if left unresolved. Jacob wouldn't even know where to begin. None of them would. As I traced through the code, something shifted in my chest. Not anger, I'd moved past that years ago. Not hurt, that had scarred over. This was clarity, sharp and absolute. They hadn't just overlooked me, they'd erased me. 11 years of innovation, problem solving, and system architecture had been absorbed into the company's mythology with someone else's name attached. I wasn't just invisible, I was being actively written out of my own story. I fixed the synchronization issue at 11:37 p.m., preventing a disaster they'd never know almost happened. As the systems hummed back to perfect harmony, I made my decision. They thought the machines ran themselves. They thought the code was just there, maintaining itself, evolving on its own. They thought Jacob's PowerPoints and buzzwords were what kept the lights on. I pulled up my personal documentation, years of meticulous records. Every system, every dependency, every critical function that I alone understood. I'd been building my insurance policy without realizing I was actually building my exit strategy. I won't destroy them, I said to the empty room, my voice steady. They'll destroy themselves the moment I stop holding it all together. The plan formed with the same elegant logic I applied to system design: clean, efficient, inevitable. They wanted to erase me, I'd make myself truly invisible, and then they'd learn exactly what they'd been unable to see. I began that night, working with the methodical precision of someone who'd already made peace with the ending. They'd had 11 years to see me. Now they'd have a lifetime to remember what they'd lost. The next morning, I began architecting my absence with the same precision I'd used to build their empire. First, the dependencies. Over the years, I'd created elegant solutions that were also intricate puzzles. The beauty of complex systems is that they can be both transparent and opaque, functioning perfectly while hiding their true nature. I started adding layers, subtle modifications that would remain dormant until triggered by my absence. The automated supply chain system relied on a cascade of microservices I'd written. I refactored them, adding Byzantine authentication loops that checked for specific tokens that would expire 30 days after my last login. The system would continue running smoothly until then, giving me time to disappear cleanly. The predictive maintenance AI that saved them millions annually. I wrapped its core algorithms in dependency chains that seemed redundant but were actually load-bearing. Remove one specific module, a module whose documentation I carefully omitted, and the entire prediction matrix would degrade into expensive false positives. But my masterpiece was the energy distribution system. The AI that balanced power loads across their entire production infrastructure. Preventing overloads and optimizing consumption, it was my creation from the ground up. I'd written it during my own time, using my personal development environment. Technically, legally, it was mine. I incorporated Monroe Systems LLC in Delaware. Clean, simple, legitimate. Then I transferred the copyright for the energy distribution codebase to my company. The beauty was that Delta Forge never knew this critical system ran on code I owned personally. They'd never asked, never checked. Why would they? I was invisible. Over 6 weeks, I systematically handed off my responsibilities to Jacob's team. I conducted training sessions, created documentation that was comprehensive yet subtly incomplete. I explained the what and the how, but never the why. I showed them which buttons to press, but not what made the buttons work. This is really complex. One of Jacob's senior engineers complained during a handoff meeting. Can't we simplify it? It's as simple as it can be while handling our scale, I replied truthfully. They didn't need to know about the elegant shortcuts I'd removed. the intuitive interfaces I'd obscured, the self-healing protocols I'd disabled. Jacob himself attended one session, typing notes on his laptop while barely looking at the screen. Great knowledge transfer, Rachel. Really comprehensive. We should have documented all this years ago. I smiled. Yes, we should have. The documentation I provided was a masterwork of malicious compliance. Every procedure was accurate but written for someone who already understood the system. Every troubleshooting guide assumed knowledge I knew they didn't possess. It would take them months to realize what was missing, and by then, it would be too late. I also began the delicate process of extracting myself from the informal networks that really kept things running. The backdoor SSH keys, the monitoring scripts that alerted me to problems before they escalated, the cron jobs that handled edge cases the official systems missed, one by one. I let them expire or transferred them to accounts that would lock after I left. The final touch was psychological. I started being more helpful than ever, responding instantly to requests, fixing problems before anyone noticed them. I wanted them comfortable, complacent, certain that everything was handled. Rachel's really stepped up lately. I overheard Jacob telling someone. Maybe we were wrong about her leadership potential. Too late for that. Jacob, far too late. 3 weeks before my planned departure, I filed the copyright registrations for Monroe Systems' software portfolio. Every custom module, every proprietary algorithm, every piece of code I'd written on my own time. My lawyer, yes, I had a lawyer now, assured me everything was ironclad. They've been using your software without a license? He asked, reviewing the documents. They never asked who owned it, I replied. He smiled the way sharks do when they smell blood in the water. Their mistake. By August, everything was in place. The systems would run perfectly for exactly 30 days after I left. Then, like a Swiss watch missing a single gear, they would begin their elegant descent into chaos. I wasn't destroying anything. I was simply taking myself with me when I left. They'd just never realized how much of me was woven into their foundation. August 29, 2024. I composed my resignation email at 4:47 a.m., having spent the night ensuring every system was running at peak performance. One last gift of stability before the countdown began. 2. HR Delta Forge. Com, CC, Direct Manager Delta Forge. Com. Subject. Resignation, Rachel Monroe. Thank you for the past years. I will be leaving Delta Forge effective September 1st. 14 words. No explanation, no emotion, no bridge burning. Just a statement of fact, as invisible as I'd always been. I submitted it at exactly 9:00 a.m. and watched my inbox from the server room. The first response came at 9:23 from HR. A template acknowledgement with exit interview scheduling. My direct manager replied at 10:15. Understood. Please ensure all handoffs are complete. No questions, no concern, no, can we talk about this? After 11 years, I merited less attention than a departed intern. Jacob's response came at 2:37 p.m., ceasing half the leadership team. Thanks for all your help, Rachel. I'm confident we've got everything covered. Best of luck in your next adventure. Your confidence is misplaced, Jacob, but you'll learn that soon enough. I spent my last 2 days in methodical preparation. Clean desk, clean directories, clean conscience. I left behind detailed runbooks for routine operations, the kind that would work perfectly until something went wrong. The USB drive I placed in my drawer was a particularly elegant touch, labeled simply, "Good luck." It contained nothing but a single text file. You should have seen me. On my final afternoon, I walked through the production floor one last time. The servers hummed their familiar song, the automated systems flowing in perfect synchronization. Workers barely glanced up as I passed, the invisible woman taking her invisible leave. I stopped by Jacob's corner office. He was in a meeting, gesturing at a whiteboard covered with my system diagrams, redrawn in his handwriting. Through the glass, I watched him explain concepts he didn't understand to people who understood even less. He saw me and waved distractedly, already forgetting I was leaving. It disabled my access at 5 p.m. sharp. I watched from my personal laptop as my keycard permissions evaporated. My email account went dark. My remote access terminated. 11 years of digital existence erased in seconds. But they'd missed something crucial. The Monroe Systems licenses didn't require my Delta Forge credentials. That code would keep running, obedient and stable, for exactly 30 more days. Then it would check for a license renewal that would never come. I packed my personal items into a single banker's box. A coffee mug, a stress ball shaped like a server, a photograph from the 2015 holiday party where I stood at the edge, barely in frame. The detritus of a career spent in the shadows. Security didn't escort me out. There was no exit interview beyond the perfunctory HR checklist. I carried my box through the lobby as dozens of colleagues passed without recognition. The evening shift was arriving, the day shift leaving, and I was just another body in the flow. In the parking lot, I loaded the box into my car and sat for a moment, engine off, watching the building I'd helped sustain. Through the windows, I could see the server room lights blinking, the production floor operating smoothly, the executive offices glowing with importance. They thought they were a technology company. They thought their competitive advantage was innovation and leadership and strategic vision. They never understood they were a Rachel Monroe company, built on invisible foundations I'd laid with invisible hands. My phone buzzed. An automated system alert. Minor issue in production line 3. My fingers moved reflexively toward the keyboard before I caught myself and smiled. Not my problem anymore. I started the car and drove away, leaving behind 11 years of being essential but unseen. In 30 days, they'd understand what they'd lost. But I wouldn't be around to watch. I had a company to build, one where the architect wouldn't be erased from her own blueprints. The countdown had begun. They just didn't know it yet. October 2nd, 2024. Day 32 of my absence. I was reviewing contracts for 3 potential clients when my personal phone erupted with calls from Cleveland area codes. I let them go to voicemail and opened my monitoring dashboard. Yes, I still had read-only access to public-facing metrics. The cascade had begun exactly as architected. The first domino fell at 6:23 a.m. when the production line synchronization failed. Without my ghost protocols managing the edge cases, the systems tried to self-correct and instead amplified the errors. Line 1 overcorrected, line 2 compensated, line 3 crashed entirely. The beautiful butterfly effect of interconnected systems with no one who understood their interdependencies. By 8 a.m., the energy distribution AI had detected the production anomalies and, lacking my proprietary optimization module, defaulted to its base programming, maximum safety protocols. It shut down non-essential systems across the board, including several that were definitely essential but poorly categorized in the documentation I'd left behind. The Meridian contract required 99.7% uptime. They were already at 94% and falling. My phone showed 17 missed calls by noon. I recognized the numbers. Operations, Jacob, my former manager. Numbers I'd never seen, which meant they were escalating up the chain. The voicemails grew increasingly frantic. Rachel, hi, it's Jacob. Quick question about the sync protocols. Rachel, urgent issue with production. Please call back ASAP. Ms. Monroe. This is David Chen, VP of Operations. We need to discuss your immediate return. Rachel. Legal needs to understand the licensing structure for some systems. That last one made me smile. They'd found the copyright notices. By 3 p.m., the news had reached LinkedIn. Breaking. Delta Forge Technologies experiences major production disruption. Sources report 1.2 million source in losses and climbing. The comments speculated about cyber attacks, equipment failures, sabotage. No one guessed the truth. They'd simply lost the person who kept it all running. The real poetry began when they tried to restore from backups. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply designed the backup system to mirror the live environment precisely, including all its dependencies, including the expired licenses, including the missing modules they didn't know were missing. Every restore put them back exactly where they started. Broken. At 4:17 p.m., an email arrived from Delta Forge Legal. Ms. Monroe, it has come to our attention that critical systems may be running on unlicensed software. We need to discuss this urgently to avoid any misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. As if 11 years of invisibility was a simple miscommunication. At 5:45 p.m., Jacob called from his personal cell. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Rachel, please. We're hemorrhaging money. The Meridian team is threatening to pull the contract. No one understands how to fix this. I know you're upset about things, but we need you. The company needs you. I let that voicemail play twice, savoring the desperation in his voice. The company needs you. Where was that recognition when it mattered? By evening, the losses had topped $5 million. The second and third shifts were sent home. Emergency meetings were called. I imagined the conference rooms filled with executives staring at systems they'd never bothered to understand, depending on knowledge they'd never valued. My new client inquiries doubled as word spread through the industry. Competitors smelled blood in the water. 3 companies that had lost bids to Delta Forge reached out directly, interested in my consulting services. At 10:30 p.m., I received a text from an unknown number. Rachel, this is Marcus Williams, CEO. I apologize for not recognizing your contributions. We need you back. Name your price. Please. The CEO who hadn't known my name now had my personal number. Amazing how visible I'd become in my absence. I poured a glass of wine and drafted my response to legal. Monroe Systems LLC owns all reference software. Licensing is available at commercial rates. Please direct all inquiries to my attorney. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. Tomorrow, the real negotiations would begin. They thought losing $5 million in a day was painful. They were about to learn the true cost of invisibility. October 3rd, 2024. Day 33. Delta Forge's emergency board meeting started at 7 a.m. I knew because my attorney called at 7:15. They're in full panic mode, he said, barely suppressing his amusement. They've brought in 3 consulting firms to diagnose the systems. None of them can even understand the architecture, let alone fix it. The forensic investigation had revealed the true scope of their dependence. 11 years of patches, workarounds, custom modules, and proprietary solutions, all leading back to one name they'd systematically ignored, Rachel Monroe. By noon, the consultants had delivered their verdict. The entire automation infrastructure was built on undocumented dependencies and unlicensed software. Replacing it would take 18 to 24 months and cost approximately $50 million. The Meridian contract would be lost. Other clients were already asking questions. Jacob was the first casualty. Security escorted him out at 2 p.m., his LinkedIn updating to "Seeking new opportunities within the hour." The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd finally made him as invisible as I'd been. The phone calls evolved from desperate to threatening. "You sabotaged us," accused the head of IT. "This is corporate espionage." I removed my personal property. I corrected. "Check your employment contracts. Any software developed on personal time remains the property of the developer unless explicitly transferred." Did anyone ever ask me to transfer ownership? Silence. Did anyone ever ask me anything about the systems I built? More silence. The head of legal tried a different approach. "We paid your salary. Everything you created belongs to Delta Forge." My salary paid for 40 hours a week of automation engineering. Would you like me to calculate the actual hours I worked? The nights, weekends, holidays I spent building systems that saved you millions? My attorney has very detailed records. They spent 3 days trying to find someone, anyone, who could understand my code well enough to recreate it. The consulting firms quoted astronomical figures and timeline estimates that would bankrupt them before completion. Meanwhile, the losses mounted. $5 million, $10 million, $15 million. The production lines ran at 30% capacity. The Meridian contract was suspended. Stock prices began to slide as rumors of operational challenges leaked to the press. The Invisible Woman had become the most visible crisis in company history. On October 5th, Marcus Williams himself called. "Rachel, I'm prepared to offer you $500,000 to come back immediately. Full retroactive promotion to VP of Engineering. Your name on every system you built. Public recognition of your contributions." I'm not interested in employment," I replied calmly. "Then, what do you want?" Monroe Systems licenses its software portfolio starting at $5 million per week for emergency deployment. That includes 24/7 support and system stabilization. After stabilization, we can discuss long-term licensing rates. That's extortion. That's market rate for catastrophic system recovery. Check with your consultants. He did. They confirmed my pricing was actually reasonable given the circumstances. The real revelation came when they audited their documentation, trying to understand how they'd become so dependent on one person. They found my hidden folder, my 11 years of meticulous records. Every innovation attributed to others. Every solution claimed by managers who couldn't spell algorithm. Every time my work vanished into the corporate machinery with someone else's name attached. "My God," someone whispered in a recorded meeting my attorney later obtained. "We erased her. We literally erased her from everything she built." The board meeting transcripts were even more damning. "How did we not know?" board members demanded. "How does someone this critical remain invisible for 11 years? "Because you weren't looking," I thought. Reading the leaked documents. Because invisible people are convenient until they disappear. On October 7th, they capitulated. Monroe Systems LLC was hired at emergency rates. I would return not as an employee, but as a vendor, a consultant, a very visible and very expensive necessity. But I had one more surprise waiting. October 8th, 2024. I walked through Delta Forge's lobby for the first time in 37 days. But everything had changed. Security knew my name. Executives stepped aside in the hallway. The invisibility cloak I'd worn for 11 years had been replaced by something far more powerful. Undeniability. Marcus Williams waited in the boardroom with the entire C-suite. The same room where they'd celebrated the Meridian contract without me. Now they sat silent, humbled by spreadsheets showing $47 million in losses and counting. "Ms. Monroe," Marcus began, "we're prepared to sign your emergency services contract." I placed my leather portfolio on the table, a far cry from the battered notebook I used to carry. "Before we proceed, there's something you should know. I've already signed contracts with Titan Industries, Apex Manufacturing, and Stellar Dynamics." The blood drained from their faces. Those were Delta Forge's 3 biggest competitors. "You're working for our competition," the CFO sputtered. "I'm providing them with next-generation automation solutions. The kind of innovations I developed here, refined here, and was ignored for here. They were quite interested in hiring someone with 11 years of experience revolutionizing production systems. That's corporate theft." "No," I said calmly. "That's recognizing talent. Something you had 11 years to do." I opened my portfolio and pulled out a single document. "This is my offer. Monroe Systems will stabilize your current systems for the emergency rate we discussed. However, I will not be recreating the advanced features I developed. Those belong to my new clients now. You'll have functional systems, but you'll be running 3 years behind your competition." 3 years? That's how far ahead my innovations put you. Now that advantage belongs to companies that value their people. The silence stretched until Marcus finally asked, "What would it take to get those innovations back?" "You can't," I said simply. "That window closed when you celebrated my work with my name erased from it. When you promoted everyone around me while I held your company together. When you made me invisible. I stood to leave, then turned back. Oh, there's one more thing. The tech conference next month, Tech Innovate 2024. I'm the keynote speaker. My topic is The Hidden Architecture: How Invisible Engineers Build Visible Empires. I'll be discussing my work at Delta Forge extensively, with full documentation. Their lawyers shifted uncomfortably. They knew they couldn't stop me. Every innovation I'd discuss was built on my time, my ideas, my code that they'd never bothered to claim properly. 2 weeks later, I stood on that conference stage, looking out at an audience of 3,000 tech professionals. The presentation behind me showed Delta Forge's systems, my systems, in intricate detail. For 11 years, I was invisible, I began. I built systems that generated hundreds of millions in revenue. I solved problems that saved careers, contracts, and companies. And in all that time, I was never invited to a single strategy meeting, never promoted, never recognized. The audience was riveted. In the third row, I spotted several Delta Forge executives, including some board members. But invisibility taught me something valuable. It taught me to document everything, to protect my work, to know my worth even when others didn't see it. And when I finally left, taking my knowledge and my code with me, they lost $5 million a day. Applause rippled through the crowd. The lesson isn't about revenge, I continued. It's about recognition. Every company has invisible architects, people whose work is essential but whose names are forgotten. Find them, value them, promote them. Because the cost of invisibility isn't paid by the invisible, it's paid by those who refuse to see. Standing ovation. Afterward, recruiters swarmed with offers. Companies wanted to hire not just my skills, but my story. The woman who proved that invisible doesn't mean powerless. Delta Forge survived, barely. They run on my basic systems now. Functional but uncompetitive. Their stock never recovered. The Meridian contract went to Titan Industries, whose new automation platform bears a striking resemblance to certain innovations I developed over 11 years. As for me, Monroe Systems now employs 47 engineers, all former invisible architects from various companies. We specialize in helping overlooked talent recognize their worth and retain ownership of their brilliance. My office has glass walls. Everyone can see me now. But more importantly, I make sure everyone on my team is seen. They wanted me invisible. Instead, I became unforgettable. Because they were right about one thing. I was the ghost in their machine. They just never imagined what would happen when the ghost left the building. Thank you so much for listening to this story of sweet revenge. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever felt invisible at work? What would you have done in Rachel's position? Let me know in the comments.